Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today on the pod, we're going to be talking with Lisa Burgoyne. You may remember Lucas Bourgoyne. He was on the podcast not too long ago, a professional cyclist. Anyway, this is his mother, and she is the CEO of The Landing, which is a Houston-based nonprofit dedicated to serving survivors of human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation with a trauma-informed approach fueled by the love of Christ. That is the description of what she does. She's an amazing person. And this conversation is a bit different. I don't know if it's necessarily just me and maybe my fuzzy brain a little bit, but with whatever I've got going on internally, the conversation sparked me to share a little bit of some of the things that I've been through, and then really was seeking from her, I guess, some advice and just kind of opening up the space for her to give the opportunity to give me a little direction. I didn't necessarily want to seek that type of advice in this podcast, but that's what ended up happening. Let the spirit move, if you will. It was a really great conversation, and she did really awesome, has an amazing story, and is doing amazing things, and we'll definitely have her on again. So don't want to spoil too much, but if you do want to help support her cause in any way, check out the show notes, links to thelanding.org, and make sure to check all the show notes and descriptions for all other ways to help out the podcast as well. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening to my spiel. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to Lisa Burgoyne. Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on the podcast. It's been an honor to meet some of the people who are more closely tied to your life through Luke and Lucas. But so awesome to get connected with you. Just thank you, first of all, for being on here and chatting with me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Great guys, by the way.
Oh, yeah, they are great guys. I look forward to, it's funny, I haven't been as involved in the professional cycling world as much. It's been more triathlon, and so I'm trying to branch out. So it's been cool to get to know them. And then through their mutual connections, I've gotten to know quite a few people, even a Formula E driver, I guess, that they got to meet at a track somewhere. So,
wow. Yeah. They are cool guys, great personalities, and wonderful connectors.
Yeah. So where are you at right now?
I'm at the Landing. I am at work. It is Monday morning, hit the ground running.
Yeah, no kidding. Did you take off most of last week for Thanksgiving?
I took off a couple of days. We actually have a Thanksgiving drive, so I wanted to be in for that because I'm relatively new to the Landing. And we fed about 150 families last week, which was pretty awesome. Wow. So I didn't want to miss that opportunity. So did that, and then took some time off and just had some downtime with family, which was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you said you're relatively new with the Landing. Where were you at before?
I was at the Children's Assessment Center. It's our child advocacy center in Harris County. And I spent about almost 28 years at the advocacy center before coming here.
Okay, wow. So you are from Texas, born and raised?
Houston, Texas. Yes, born and raised in Texas. I was actually born in a small town about an hour outside of Houston called El Campo. Moved to Houston for college and have been here ever since.
Wow. So there's so many questions I want to ask, and
Sure.
We've already touched a little bit around your work, but we'll definitely get to that. So I want to start a little bit earlier in your life, like growing up. So did you have siblings?
I did. Yes, I have two sisters and a brother who is no longer with us.
Wow.
So there were four of us growing up.
Yeah. How long ago did your sibling pass, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, yeah, it's been, 2017, he passed away.
Wow. Yeah, so not too long
he was
ago.
young too, 40-ish.
Yeah. Do you mind me asking what happened?
He was in a car accident, very tragic, very sudden. Yeah. And he was our only brother, kind of pride and joy of the family.
Yeah.
So let me see this. Sorry to pop up on my phone.
Yeah, of course.
Pride and joy of our family. We miss him a lot. And around holidays, November's a tough time for us and our family. We lost my mom in November as well during COVID. And so going home is always a wonderful thing, but it's also, just a time of reflection and remembrance and, some of the hurts that are still there from losses, but also a really great time of connection too.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious, just because we're kind of on this vein with, the remembrance and the reflection that time of year, because especially it's more concentrated around November. Do you notice in yourself changes in the way that you deal with just life during that time and season? Do you have like habitual patterns that you notice change, or the way that you think or feel about things?
I think, yeah, I think so. I mean, it probably hits after, and I realize it after. Oh,
Mm,
like this is what's going on. Not always leading up to it, and I think any kind of trauma or any loss that you have kind of tends to happen that way, and then it clicks and it makes sense. But yeah, for sure. Your body, body keeps the score. You
mm,
remember the way that we interact, the way that we uh, grieve just happens naturally, right? And yeah, so definitely there's a difference.
yeah. So, from your perspective, how would you say, or what would you say to the question like, "Who is Lisa?"
Lisa is probably for the last 24 years, it's been Lucas's mom,
Awesome.
hashtag mom. That
Mm-hmm.
is a big part of my identity. I'm a mom, wife. Renee's my husband, and I'm a counselor by profession. I've been a licensed professional counselor since the early 2000s. I'm a social servant. I'm a believer. Um, and my service now has taken me to a CEO position at the Landing.
Mm,
Um, I'm a good friend. I'm a helper.
yeah. That helper mentality, because you said you've been involved in social services, and obviously what you're doing now with the Landing. Um, was that always like a value to you? Is that something that you grew up with? Was that something that a value that your family instilled in you, or how do you think it balances out?
Oh, most definitely. My mom, I would say, is probably the greatest influence on my life and my life's work. She, from the time I can remember, just had us volunteering, whether it was at our church or in our community. I remember as a kid, my sisters and I played the piano and we
Mm,
sang, and we would go to, just nursing homes or
mm,
different community events, and my mom would have us entertain, visit, and it just has been a way of life. She
mm.
always believed in giving back and in service, and I think part of that is, her faith, her Christianity, the faith that we were raised with, and yeah, I think it's definitely always been a part of who I am.
Yeah. It's interesting. When growing up, we also went to different nursing homes or old folks' homes to go and play music, and we most often sing. But as we got older, we got to take some instruments, and it was such a good environment, honestly, to learn how to
Yes.
perform a little bit, but then also to realize like, oh wow, this adds actual value to other people. Because most of the times, I think when I was younger, it was like, oh, I want to perform this so I feel good, rather than what it can be
Mhm.
given. Yeah, it's interesting.
Right. There's so much joy in that, and such a little thing on our part to show up. But the reach is far, for sure.
Yeah. Did you ever go through a time when you found that, okay, well, like this way of life, these sets of values, Christianity, like became more of your own? Did you ever through a time when you're like, maybe this isn't for me? And
Mm, I think it's always been a part of who I am. Did I question? Probably when I left home and moved to college. I think there's a normal questioning of like, is it is this is this me? Is this my belief? Is this yes, exactly what you're asking. I would say more during my college years, I stepped away from the traditional beliefs my parents have, but I always found my way back. And I feel like there were some years there where like you're just um, figuring things out for yourself, and it doesn't take long to come back to like what really matters and
mm,
what's really important. I remember moving to Houston. My mom would always say, like the most important things were to like find a place to serve and find a church. Like those were the two things, and those were questions she'd ask every time she checked in. Have you found a place to serve? Have you found a church? Because those were things she knew that would keep us grounded and reminded of where we came from and what was important in life. And so I quickly found a church and found a place to serve. And I think those early years of serving on my own kind of led were the I was talking about it actually talking to an intern this morning and about my early service years and how I landed in this position. And I started at the Covenant House, and like full circle, because the Covenant House is very similar to the Landing, which is where I am now. And except they served youth, and it was a lot of youth who were homeless and displaced, living on the lower streets of Westheimer, ingrained in human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. And then fast forward 20, almost 30 years. And here I am again, starting on this journey, but more focused on adults and teenagers.
Yeah. As you moved through those ranks and started to learn more about yourself, did you consider yourself a leader? Do you consider yourself like a leader now?
Definitely so. Servant leader. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. How is that journey, like, what has it taught you about leadership? Because in the beginning, with the different levels of service you were going through, working at the Covenant House, and you said being involved as like a servant leader early on. Most of the times, those are from like volunteer positions, so you're working with other
Sure.
people and following their vision, and obviously you have your own direct influence. But now, as a
Yeah.
position as a leader, how has that changed?
Because I've served for so long, I have always felt like we can do more, like just internally. No matter where I was serving, no matter what I was doing, I just always had this feeling like we can do more. And in a leadership position, you have the opportunity to do more. And when I say that, like it's not the title, it's not the position that you're in. You can lead from wherever, even as the volunteer, right? When you see a way that you can do something better, where you can serve more, where you can give more, where you can impact more lives. Like I think that's always been a little bit a part of me, whether I was, volunteering for free or in a leadership or an executive leadership position.
Yeah. How long ago was college for you? Like, and what did you take there?
A very long time ago. I went to college and graduated from high school in '89. So I went to college in early '90s. I psychology background for undergrad and sociology, and then for graduate school, again, educational psychology. I knew that I wanted to work with children. I didn't know what capacity, but I knew I wanted to work with kids.
Yeah. Where do you think that came from? Like, why kids in the beginning?
Also probably something influenced by my mom. She was always a Sunday school teacher. She was always a mom to kids from broken homes. She was always a helper. And I think I grew up in that, and it was familiar. It was what I knew. And I think, something I gravitated towards. Kids are so innocent and resilient, and there's so much hope that you get from kids, even as an adult. And so I think I've always just been pulled in that direction, like really believing that we can trans you know transform lives, really. If you can impact the life of a child, like you can change the trajectory of so many lives through one child who gets an opportunity that they may not have gotten otherwise.
Yeah. Because you've been doing it for a while now, have you seen any kind of full circle moments when you've met someone probably at a very low time or a time of need, then you were able to like impact them, and then years later, like you have an interaction with them or hear a story about those kinds of people and how it's bettered their life?
Yeah, it's interesting. You don't always get those moments as a counselor. Like you rarely get those moments, right? Because you spend time with them and you go through a healing process, and at some point they graduate, they finish their work with you, and then they're gone, right? And so you don't get to see that end point where they finally reach, whatever that path is, because it can take years and years, especially in the type of work that I do, because it's heavily trauma focused. But I will say, when I started my career, I worked for Child Protective Services for about 5 years, and just really spent some time with, one summer, we actually had this, created a girls group for a number of girls that we were working with, middle school girls. And we volunteered in the community. We took them. It doesn't exist anymore, but I'm dating myself again. There's a place called Astroworld. It's a big amusement park in Houston. Lots of fun. People love that place. We served together. We hung out together. We talked about life. Really incredible summer for these girls who would never get a camp experience. Because they couldn't afford that, or because their parents were just not in a stable place to be able to provide that for them. And so fast forward like 20 years, and I get a message from a Facebook message, and it's one of the girls who was a part of that camp. And she had this box, and she sent me a picture in this little shoebox. And inside of it were the pictures from that summer and the letter that I wrote her when we finished the camp that year. And this was just, I was working with her parents, and she sent a story like after that. She held on to this all these years, right? She's 20 something, and she's holding on to something from junior high. Like, it meant that much to her to keep that. And her life wasn't easy. She went through a lot of different homes and transitions, but it was meaningful to her, right? And created some real impact. And she shared her story online, and she said things didn't go the way she wanted them to. Like, it didn't work out with her mom. They continued to struggle, like all the things. But at the end of the day, like, she found value in that and relationship, and knew that she was loved and cared for. And like, that really, it meant something, right? It made a difference. So again, you don't get a whole lot of those moments as a counselor. You get some of them, and that was one that really meant a lot. It's really special.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's always amazing to me, in my own life, and in people I've observed as well, as they go to try to make an impact in the world. It's often the things that we forget about that we do kind of in the by the way, these small little moments that make the biggest impact for others. And for people who've impacted me, I've gone back to several of them over the years and be like, hey, this really meant a lot to me during this time. They usually don't even remember. So it's really interesting how, I'm going to say, I'm going to have this big speech and it's going to impact thousands. And then it's like something you said before the speech or after the speech, or a hand you shook after the event or whatever. It's like these little things that make the real big difference.
I agree. I had a mom tell me one time, we were in therapy for a long time with a really young child who had been assaulted, and she worked so hard to turn things around for her kids. And there was a line, I saw her again, maybe 15 years later. Her kids are teenagers, and they, struggling through some things. And she said, there's something you said to me a long time ago. And it was like, is it working? And she said, I didn't realize I said this. She's like, is this working? And she said, I have asked myself that over and over. And every time I have a challenge, like, I can hear your voice, and it is this working? And if it's not, let's figure out something else to do to make this better. And so you're right. Like, it can be something so minor that I had no idea, meant something to her, that she took away from that, and it helped her in parenting her kids through some really difficult times.
That's a beautiful story. With the different work, just everything that goes along with like sexual exploitation with kids, with adults, all these things that you are constantly hearing about, and you're not just hearing about them, but you're meeting the people who go through these things. I feel like there's probably a level of trauma that could even be imposed on yourself just from hearing and knowing and being involved with so much of this work. And maybe that's an unhealthy response. I don't know exactly what it is, so this may be a dumb question, but how do you go through these, couple of decades of work or more with all of these different people, hearing of all of these atrocities, and then be able to, I guess, find peace or comfort, or do you have it? Like, do you sleep well at night? Like, how do you go through those things?
I don't sleep.
Yeah.
I really don't sleep. No, I was a forensic interviewer for a number of years, and a big portion of my career was in forensic services. And if you don't know what that is, when a child has been sexually assaulted, a trained forensic interviewer will sit with that child and create a safe space for them to talk about what happened to them. Talking to somebody versus a police officer in a police station. There are child advocacy centers where that work is done, and you do it 5 times a day, and it is probably the most horrific accounts of life that you will ever hear. And these are, these incredibly beautiful, innocent kids who are going through this and sharing things that you as an adult maybe haven't even heard about, right? And so learning some of life through kids, I think there are so many things that have helped me. I think being in a secondary trauma is very real. Like, it happens. And I've, when I teach and train today to professionals coming into this work, it's like, have whatever your outlet is, like, know it going in, because it will change you. It will affect your life. And you may think like we're all in this to save the world, or to make the world a better place, or to do good, but it is going to have an impact on you, and you're not going to know it until it's probably too late, if it's right. And I, in this work, there are a lot of heroes, or a lot of champions who do incredibly hard work. But I've seen a lot of folks like really crash and burn, because it is hard, right? It is trauma, and you cannot avoid it. Like, you're walking into the fire. So be prepared as you can be, so that it doesn't affect you in such a negative way. But it took us a long time. Like, child advocacy it hasn't been around that long. It was like in the 80s that this profession was even created. And I think we probably were 20 years in before we really, like, those of us who stayed in the movement, started talking about how it really impacted our lives. Whether that was through, alcohol or drug addictions, or, just addictions in general, or you could really derail yourself. For me, it was my family, having, and I would tell Lucas and Ren all the time, like, things have to be good at home, because they are so messed up in my daily work. And so when I come home, I just need it to be good, and I need it to be wholesome. And thankfully, Lucas was such an active kid, and he had so many, he was always involved in sports, and just, had busy life. And so when I left the office, like, it was full-time mom mode. And that took me out into a healthy environment. And the opportunity to see something that was so good, right? When you see brokenness all day long, and to hope that each one of those kids would have that. I think my faith, church and godly friends, I think that was also helpful. And then again, my parents, I leaned on my mom quite a bit. Just an understanding and coping. And
so what are some of the like signs? Because you mentioned earlier, like, oh, most people won't notice until it's too late. So maybe what are some of like the earlier signs that people should be aware of if they are in this type of work, or even if they're experiencing, the secondhand stuff from someone in their family? What are some of those early signs that they can notice and then be like, okay, I should probably find an outlet, get a counselor, whatever, to like make sure that you are dealing with these things healthfully?
Early signs, warning signs of probably like the intrusive thoughts, things playing over and over in your head. Again, I think that's a really good sign. When your mood and your personality start to shift, probably irritability, starting to feel down, or not find joy in the things that would bring you joy normally. I think those are some real good signs. If you're a casual drinker, you might notice that you start to, right? So your one glass a week, it turned into one glass a day, turns into, one bottle. You're on the path, right? So, dependencies, I think, are real good signs. And sometimes, people say you can channel your energy in different ways. Like, working out is a great way to kind of rechannel your thoughts and your direction. Faith, church, whatever it is, family, relationships, the things that bring you joy, I think are good ways to come out of that. And therapy, counseling, see someone, talk to someone about what's going on with you. Those things are going to help you.
Yeah, for sure. With your With your work now, like at the landing, just so people are clear and totally understand, obviously you're the CEO there and you've been working there for a while now. What specifically do you guys do? And then how do you, as like the CEO, measure, okay, we're being successful right now? And I mean, that's such a terrible term I feel like to
Yeah.
use for this type of work, because it's like a success would be it never happens again and it's always going to
Yeah.
happen. So, yeah.
So, the mission of the landing is to walk alongside survivors of human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. We do that through a trauma-informed lens and with the love of Christ. And so those two things being equal. What that looks like, we are actually located on the Bissonnette Track, which is in Harris County, one of the trafficking hubs. We are known for that. And, every day when I drive into work, it is visible, it is on our streets, it is all around us. And there have been a lot of efforts to help folks get off of the streets and into care, but it is still very present and still very real here. Our drop-in center, we see probably 30 to 40 survivors every single day. We're a day center, we're a drop-in center, so it's a place where folks can come in and rest. It is very low barrier entry. They do have to be survivors, and so there is a screening. There's an intake that happens when they come to the center. But outside of that, there are no huge requirements for them to be served by us. We want to be there when they're ready for services. But if they just want to come in and rest, we have beds that they can take naps on. We have a kitchen that's available and stocked every day. We have volunteers that come in and serve hot meals each day, and classes if they choose to participate in recovery classes or to find housing or to find jobs, some kind of stability. That's our drop-in center, and it's specifically for adult survivors. We also have a youth advocacy program, and that is our advocates who actually go out into the community and work with teens that have been, that have been either trafficked or exploited. So we've 5 or 6 advocates that do that work as well. And then we have an outreach team that actually goes out and lets people know that we're here and that we're a resource and that we want to help. So they'll go out it's either street outreach or the courts or sometimes other organizations and volunteer communities, church communities, just letting them know that we're here and what we do, how we serve.
Yeah.
As far as the success, what is a success? What lets us know? I think when I come to work every day and I see that people are here and that the services are needed and that the day that I got here, I knew we'd outgrown our space because you cannot move in certain parts of our building because it is overwhelmingly utilized. And what I've heard from our clients is that, this place, the landing, is a home for them. It's a refuge for them. For some of them, they have homes, but this is a safe place. This is a place where they feel community and they feel loved and not judged. And they know that when they're ready, that the resources, that there's going to be someone there to help them with the resources that they need. The success could just be, that they made it to the landing and through our doors and had a safe place to be for the, 5 or 6 hours that they were with us, that they got clothing and they weren't outside in, the cold and rain without a jacket or without shoes. It could be very simple. It could be that they ate today. And that's a success, right? They made it to us. And the bigger wins are, when they do secure housing, when they do, they do get into rehab, when they, things like that, they've made some big steps. We have an empowerment group too that folks can go through, and it's a 10-week program, and it is intensive, and it's with our mental health professional, and they commit to ending the game. They commit to a life moving forward. They learn job skills. They prepare for interviews. There are a lot of folks who are invested in their futures, and when they graduate, they get a scholarship to either start their own business or to attend a trade school or to go back to community college or And those are huge accomplishments.
Yeah.
I think those are the biggest celebrations that we have when they graduate from these programs. But like so many things, like you kind of see the cycle and you see the graduates, and you want that to continue, and you want the trajectory to be up and forward. And the truth is that life is hard and it's difficult. And outside of that environment, like, we are still trying to figure out the ways to continue that momentum, to keep them on that trajectory, to continue to provide that support beyond that empowerment group until, they're out on their own. And we have seen some really awesome success stories from that empowerment group as well, which is inspiring, right? It
Yeah.
gives you hope.
Yeah, and hope to other people who hear that story who are in similar situations. Um, what do you know, like the percentage breakdown of people who are coming in versus like, okay, one group of people, like this is a lot of like domestic sexual abuse, like within like their family circles and whatnot, and then this is like the percentage of people that it was like a commercialized thing? Because I read this interesting statistic, I think that was on your website, saying that less than 1% of all human trafficking victims are identified, and often many victims don't even realize that they're being trafficked.
Yeah.
So like, what's the split of those people? And then I have another kind of follow-up question, but it's like, why and how do they like not realize it, I guess?
I don't know the split, because I think, the stats are hard in this field because so much goes unreported. And it's
Mm-hmm.
the same, 28 years in child advocacy with child sexual abuse. It's the same. The stats are really difficult
Yeah.
because so much is unknown. Um,
Do they tell
so
you
I,
guys? Sorry to interrupt, but like when people come in and they're like, "Hey, I was abused in this way," or whatever, like, are they required to give like certain levels of information to like receive like help in a specific area? Because commercialized versus this, like, they're obviously abuse is abuse and they're really hard, but they are different in terms of like the level of brainwashing someone might go through, the level of just, yeah.
they are different, trafficking versus commercial sexual, but at the same time, there's so much overlap, because a lot of times what you see is that this person's in a relationship with somebody, and
Mm,
they really, right, to them, it
yeah.
is their significant other, it is the love of their life, right? They don't realize that this person is manipulating, abusing, right, forcing them into, because it's been this gradual thing and part of a relationship. And so I think sometimes you see that overlap and that confusion, and percentage wise, I don't know a
That's okay.
number. Yeah, but I think it's difficult to know. And then I think a lot of folks that you see, and sometimes you hear this from adults, like, well, it's prostitution or it's commercial sex. It's a choice. And for so many of them, what I know and what I've talked to a lot of folks here about is that so many of those adults today were the kids that we saw at the advocacy center 10 years ago, 20 years ago. These were kids, or maybe we didn't see them and they never got treatment or they never got help. But these were kids who went through early childhood traumas, who have then grown up in this environment,
Mm,
and have continued in this path. And so that is one stat we are pretty familiar with. It's upwards of 90% of trafficking survivors were sexually abused as children. And so we know that there are a lot of deep, unsettled wounds that our folks carry. And sometimes the trafficker, we mentioned sometimes it's a person that they love and care about in a romantic relationship, but sometimes it's family members who are, for generations have been in this lifestyle and consider that normal,
yeah.
and they don't know any different.
Yeah.
And I've heard that on both sides, both traffickers and those being trafficked.
Mm. So many questions. What is considered sexual trafficking? Because I imagine that's a pretty broad term, and I am fairly ignorant in this world. But like, what all qualifies as being like sexually trafficked?
For an adult, sex trafficking is any force fraud, or coercion related to sexual abuse of a person. And those are the three elements: force, fraud, and coercion. For a child, those things don't have to exist. And I will say, you're not alone in not knowing. And even as a profession, it wasn't that long ago when I was interviewing kids, like in the mid 2000s. The term child prostitution was still a term. People were still looking at kids who were picked up in what they considered prostitution, right? And charging kids because they didn't know what else to do with them, right? And it was considered a crime, and they were considered, right, as participating in this.
Wow.
It was years later, right, that we understood and recognized, like, these kids weren't out there on their own. They were being forced into this. So they were being sold into this, right? But we have grown tremendously, I think, as a community, and the laws that protect kids and adults, right, from exploitation.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to say some strong things here, and I want to get kind of your reaction, but this is truly how I feel. And I feel like, I don't know if others feel this way, but when it comes to, like, especially children, the trafficking of kids, there's literally no other thing that I think that I would have the same motivation to literally try to hunt down and take the life of somebody who's done these types of things, especially children. Because when you're talking about, my wife's pregnant, I'm about to have a little girl, and I've been thinking about the youngness, the so young of children get involved in this and taken from their homes or taken from orphanages or whatever. And, like, this is all just continues to be, like, a topic that people don't talk about. I think because, well, for one, it's just so uncomfortable and evil, but two, it's like, I don't know, maybe that's the only reason people want to keep their skeletons in their closet. But, like, this seems like, for me, the one thing that keeps coming back up in my life, I'm like, well, what am I even doing in life if I'm not fighting this one thing? So I guess kind of my question is, like, how do you combat the sentiment or, like, the cultural norm of just, like, wanting to sweep this kind of stuff under the rug? Because everybody wants to go after domestic violence or whatever, but, like, no one wants to talk about the 3-year-old little girl who was, before she could even talk, really messed up sexually, or, like, all this stuff. It's like, these are actual problems, and nothing domestic violence isn't, but it's like, yeah, like, how do you deal with that? Like, is it just education? Like,
I think education is a huge part of prevention. And I think that the more that we talk about it, the more it is normalized. And it is, I've been doing this for almost 30 years, and it is very rare that I talk to someone or talk in front of a group or speak to anyone, really, that I don't hear a disclosure of abuse, whether it's personal abuse, someone close to them and their family, exploitation, or, child sexual abuse. Like, it is so prevalent, but we don't talk about it. And I think the only way to change that is for us to get comfortable talking about it, for us to have platforms like this, right, where we are, where we're having the conversation. And, I think too, the survivor's voice is incredibly powerful. And, we had someone speak recently and worked on an event with the survivor who openly shared her story and in detail about what that experience was like. And she's, years and years and having recovered from this and been in therapy, and it's hard, and I get it. But the more that we share, the more people that come forward, the more that this can be attacked. Like, it all matters, right? Every kid matters, every survivor matters, every arrest matters. It all matters.
Yeah. How do you deal with discretion in this type of industry, though? Because I would imagine if people are coming in and they're talking about, well, this is a potential perpetrator, or this is a group of people, or whatever, are you guys able to report that immediately? I feel like you guys need to have, like, a investigation arm of your work, because it's like they're giving evidence or potential evidence or like clues to, like, how to find out these different networks and such,
Yeah. So in Harris County in Houston, we have the Human Trafficking Rescue Alliance. our organizations and a lot of the nonprofits that are operating in Houston work with the arms of law enforcement that do this. And so the Hatcher is the group in Harris County that oversees this. So it's different when it's a child that's been abused. It's really easy. You call the 1-800 number, you make the report, right? And no abuse, no sexual contact by a child is legal. And so it's very black and white. With adults, it's a little bit different, right? Because they are the witnesses. It's their story to tell. They decide if they want to report something or not. So it's a little bit different on that end, but there are so many professionals who are experts in this field who deal with this every day. And if somebody does come to them, I'll say today is a very different response than it was, 10 or 15 years ago, because they understand the trauma that survivors have gone through, and they understand the dynamics, and that, may look confusing to someone. If somebody's in this field, they get it.
What percentage, let me ask you this question, and you may not know, but I have a hunch, and I want to make a few assumptions at the same time, but I want to ask the question first, like, where does this come from? Why does sexual abuse exist, do you think?
Wow. Why does sexual abuse exist? From a spiritual place, I think it's evil, right? I don't know how else to describe that. There's opportunity. Most sexual abuse occurs in families. It occurs in homes, right? It's not what we were raised to think was like what was it, Mr. McGruff? It's not the guy in the cloak and the hat hiding behind a bush that's going to jump out and sexually abuse you. That's not what's happening, right? So what's happening is happening in homes, behind closed doors, people using substances, alcohol, whatever, right? And I think there's just a level of evil that can exist in that space. That if we don't talk about, that if we don't pay attention to, continues.
Yeah, I agree. I also have some other thoughts, like I feel like especially with children, there's nothing closer to, I think, God on earth than a newborn child. Like the innocence, the connection, just brand new innocence, I think, is being the huge piece. So I think there's one part of that. Like I think the devil gets a sick pleasure off of that. But even more, like bringing it down to earth a little bit more and like putting the responsibility in some of our own hands. I also wonder, and I have a hunch that a large portion of the uptick in this stuff has to do with pornography.
Oh, sure.
Because as a young man, and I'll say this just so the listeners know, and you can know as well, obviously, but it's like when you're very young and you come into contact with that, it's like for the first time you've had like a small taste of a sugar, and like you get a sugar high or whatever. Yeah. And then over time, like you become tolerant to that, and then you have to go more and more and more and more and more. And same in any field of practice or any hobby or any addiction, whatever, like you're always going to keep seeking the next thing. And because it's so easily available to where you can have every type, color, shape, size, whatever exactly you want, especially with like the men in our culture, that appetite becomes insatiated. And then it's like, oh, I got to take it off screen. And then I go and do all of these things or whatever, like my, sickest fantasies are to people. So I feel like porn has to be a huge driver of this side of the world. And I'd be curious to know what you think about that.
It is definitely, I'm glad you said that. It is a factor for sure. And I would say that, one of the trends that we began to see as the internet became more popular was, and kids had more access, right, through iPhones and iPads and all those things, is that the number of child-on-child abuse increased significantly. And kids for a lot of reasons, right? Kids have less impulse control. Again, access, right? It's brothers and sisters or cousins, right? And they have access within the home, easier access to someone. And then again, like you just said about the addiction and wanting to play those fantasies out, and then having the opportunity right in front of them to do that. So we've seen just in the movement a huge, focus on child abuse, which is, it's really sad. It impacts adults as well. And I think that exposure, the internet does a lot of good, but I think in our work, in our field, what people have access to has definitely impacted what we see.
Yeah. And what's sad too, it's like, I said earlier, like there's nothing else that I'd probably hunt down and like literally kill someone for. But at the same time, it's like whoever the perpetrator is at one time was a child. Most likely they went through that same thing. And so, I feel so torn as an individual, especially as a man. It's like, well, how do I talk to this person? And my goodness, the law should be exercised and justice should be served. But at the same time, like, how do you see that person? Like, how do you see that individual? And also let them know, like, yeah, like I understand, like when you were a kid, you're loved too, and you should be loved too, and you were not. You were like abused in these ways. It's like, I don't know. My head's kind of going in circles, like trying to think about this industry that you work in.
Yeah, I will say though, I think a lot of people believe that that offenders have gone through the same thing as a child, but I think that's a myth. I think that
Really?
I think well, that happened, and so kids that were sexually abused are less likely, right? Not more likely to abuse another kid. Like they understand, like there's a level of empathy and trauma that's happened to a child that they're not going to act that out on someone else. I think what is linked is violence and exposure to violence, exposure to pornography, not necessarily their own sexual abuse victimization.
Really?
Yeah.
I need to research that because I feel like I've heard like the exact opposite. Though it's anecdotal.
Yeah.
I have never read any paper on it or whatnot. I'll have to read some stuff and link that because that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So maybe I need to have less empathy for people. like, what do you?
There's no reason, dude.
I know it's like, I mean, people are people, but yeah, it's like, oh
Yeah.
wow, that's crazy. It's
Yeah.
not as black and white as I'd love it to be.
No,
Yeah.
and I think especially when you're talking about familial abuse, like there's no excuse, but you understand, so much of what we struggle with, I think in the advocacy movement is supporting families coming around and supporting the victims, right? You would think that someone has gone through this and that everyone would be behind them and on their side and supportive of them. And I spent a lot of time testifying as an expert witness on these cases. And I cannot tell you the number of times that mom was sitting on the other side of her kids, not on the kids' side. And
Yeah. What is with
fully in
that?
belief that there was no way that this person that they loved and cared for could ever do that to their child. And I just remember really struggling, with that. Like, how could a mom not believe, right? And there are 100 reasons why we put up these defenses and create these narratives
In
that
our
this
head.
really couldn't be, right? And the blame goes onto the child, and it's really sad to see. But the more that people know, the more that they understand what those signs are, what the symptoms are, they begin to recognize more. The more that we talk about this, I think the better.
Yeah, it's got to be a survival a mechanism because when you're talking about the mom sitting on the other opposite side, I'll just share a little bit. Like, I came forward when I was 16 about sexual abuse that happened to me on several times, but then my cousin, who was living at the time with my step grandfather and my biological grandmother, like they were taking care of him, but it was the step grandfather who was the perpetrator, and we only visited every once in a while, so there were limited opportunities for me to be involved and abused. But you said the way it started was like what did you say? Child on child? Because it was like my
Hmm.
younger cousin, we're the same age, and he's suggesting
Yes.
things, and like, you're like 7 years old or whatever. So
Yeah.
stuff happens, but then as I got older, like I had like this growing level of anger toward not just the grandfather who kind of suggested these things and did other things, but my grandmother, because she seemed like willfully ignorant. And it's like
Yeah.
really difficult because I think that truthfully, there's probably a level of survival mechanism that is instilled in someone who is living with a partner who maybe committing these types of acts, because no one wants to believe that. I don't think any half-hearted
Right.
person would. But at the same time, it's like, well, how do you hold that person accountable? Or like, I don't know. It's like, why does that even exist? Why not just call a fish, and
Right.
like yeah, it makes no sense to me. It's still so blown out of a level of potential understanding.
Yeah. And they should be held accountable. Like
Hmm.
if they, I'll never forget, one of the survivors who shared her story talked about like knowing that her mom knew what was going on when she was being sexually assaulted by her father in their home.
Mm.
And she said, one night, like she heard her mom's footsteps come all the way to her door. And she thought, like, finally, like this is going to end, this is going to be over, and she said, I'll never forget that moment because she froze and her dad froze. And then she heard her mom turn around. She said, there is no way that she didn't hear what was happening in that room. And she turned around and she heard her footsteps walking away, and she knew that her mom would never protect her. Today, right, those are chargeable offenses, right?
Negligence,
To
gross
yeah,
negligence.
willfully ignore what was happening right in front of her. And it's sexual abuse by omission, by failing to protect and to do something.
How is that little girl? How does she get trained to trust anyone ever again?
Mm, whole lot of therapy, and I think it's a lifetime process, right? That whether it's this type of trauma or any trauma, those things don't go away, right? You continue to wrestle with them in different ways. I always talk to my kids, and I started, my youngest I think was 3 years old, and she was one of the ones I mentioned to you. Her mom came back years and years over the years, and she would check in and she would just say, hey, you told me that this might come up again when she started dating, or this might come up again when she had her first kiss, and this might come up, and these things come up like over time. And now she's in her first serious relationship, and this is somebody I started in treatment with when she was 3 years old, and she's in her 20s now, and still struggling with some of those things that just pop up from time to time. And she gets back into therapy and needs a reset. And not just her, right? It affects the whole family. So, yes, she gets treatment, but mom is also, she's got to deal with this too, because it was interfamilial abuse, and things come up for her as
Mm.
well. It's like a lifetime. And it's sad, right? Because you would hope for every kid that this, and you hear this from parents all the time too, like they just want their kids to forget it, right? And so, oh, they're not struggling right now, I think they've forgotten about it. Well, no, you're not ever going to forget about it. Like, you learn to deal with it, you learn to cope with it, you learn to live with it, but it is still something that is a part of you. You just learn, right? You learn mechanisms to be able to move forward, and hopefully in healthy ways.
I hope this doesn't come across as inappropriate, but because you're here and we're having this conversation, like my mind is, I haven't, it's just interesting that we're having this conversation when we are, because on the background of my life right now, I'm going through quite a few different things and trying to figure out and understand what's going on with my own past. But a conversation that I've been having with my wife now for the past, I would say 3 months or so, that I am now aware of is just like my lack of trust in our relationship.
Mhm.
Now, we all, as human to human, even if, me and you got to know each other more as friends, like there would be something that I would end up doing probably that would show like a given opportunity for a lack of trust. So, all that to say, my wife and I are very human and we do things that could make us have a lack of trust. But I'm realizing that the level of lack of trust that I have in my wife or other people in general is so directly linked to kind of what you were talking about with like this girl whose her mom is literally coming to the door and she like turns her footsteps away. And I'm like about to cry talking about this, but it's like I have like visual memory being younger and thinking my dad should have caught that. Or like I tried to almost give him a sign. And I know that memory at the same time is also like fuzzy and it's different for everybody. And everybody's memory at the same time will be totally different because their perspectives are different. Their attention's focused on different things. So there's a level of like chaos and like, well, what's real, what's not. But I have this belief still that I have not been able to figure out or place or put name to it. It's like I still don't trust my mom. I still don't trust my grandmother. Now she's passed, so I guess it really doesn't matter anymore. But a lot of these people that I don't trust because I feel like they should have caught that. They should have heard that. They should have seen that. And it's like, yeah, I'm realizing like I need to go and work through this stuff because it's like that is such a debilitating thing because all that leads in my life is just to me untrusting everyone else around me and like it's a great deterioration of relationships whenever there's a lack of trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that happened to you, first of all. Like,
Thank you.
it's just, it's heartbreaking that it happens to anyone, right?
Mm.
But I think it goes to show like how, you just don't know, right? One in four girls, one in six boys. And every time you're in a room, like there's someone in that room who has gone through this experience. And so when we talk about kind of normalizing the experience a little bit, I think that this is helpful. And my hope is that the conversation reaches someone who needs to hear it, who can, take a turn and get the help they need, work through the things that they need to normalize some of this for them. The trust part, in relationships, it sounds like every major like life experience that you go through brings up levels of this. Like you're about to have a child, and
Mm.
knowing that this impacted you as a child, this could have an impact on what you're going through now and in that relationship. But I think when it's impacted by childhood trauma, by sexual abuse, or yeah, couples therapy is a great thing. And whether it's a faith-based or not, I don't, I don't know where y'all are in that, but would highly, highly encourage that because I think it can destroy relationships just as easily, right? That
Yeah.
lack of trust or that blame or the shame or any of those feelings, right, that don't get worked out, that then get transferred to your partner
Mm-hmm.
through no fault of their own. And I've seen that happen. And it's hard because it's not something you're choosing, right,
Yeah.
to do. It is just a reaction
Yeah.
based on your experience.
Mm. Well, it's dealing with the belief. Like belief seems to be at the center and core of everything in my life and how I operate and how I observe others operate. Because what the decisions you make are fundamentally settled upon the belief in something. Well, if I believe that if I push down on the gas pedal, then it will move forward or if I believe if I have this hard conversation, then hopefully it'll lead to a better place and we'll have worked through some things. So like that's the thing I'm dealing with. And honestly, I think there's probably some conversations I need to have with like family members of like, but that's the thing too. It's like if you sit down with those people and have those conversations, I have to be willing to talk to, we'll just use, I don't know, an aunt as a scapegoat. Hey, I have this belief that you knew what was going on. And for years you've told me you didn't. And then I have to be willing to either believe what they say when they likely are going to say, no, I don't, or just like
Right.
come to terms with and like have a level of forgiveness and peace, I guess, to like, well, they're not there or whatever. But everybody wants closure. Like that's what you're seeking. It's like, how do I close the loop so I can push this away and kind of deal with it for now? So I think, yeah. And then to reiterate what you're saying, yeah, I think I'm going to continue to seek counseling. I've got an appointment this week, although I might be trying to find a different type. So
Yeah.
we'll see. Everyone's going through it. And yeah, I hope that as people hear this conversation and can hopefully pick up on just the obscure, confused nature of some of my questions. Like I'm realizing like, oh my goodness, like I'm trying to work through this as I'm asking questions about it. And this is probably not the best podcast, but you are doing great. And I really appreciate you answering and counseling a little bit and like sharing what's going on.
You don't have to air this podcast.
No, I'll air it.
You really don't. I, just have such a, such a heart for survivors. And, one thing just in listening to you talk about all the folks around you, if I, can share anything, and I don't give advice. I walk alongside people. That's just how I practice. And, um, but finding the places within you internally for those answers and that forgiveness and that letting go, and that like letting go is such a big thing. If you can get to that place and it be extra, like it's not dependent on the folks who are around you who did or didn't, right?
Yeah.
And it just is about healing what's here. None of that other stuff matters. Their acknowledgement of it, their acceptance, none of that matters. Like it's what's going on in here, and the parts of you and the parts, right, that are inside of you that need to be healed. Again, because people will disappoint you.
Almost
And
every
really
time.
only you have control over you and not anybody else outside of you. So maybe that child that you're about to have. So
Yeah, no kidding. No, I appreciate you saying that. And I, it's interesting, like the main perpetrator and my cousin, who were both involved in like these different levels of sexual abuse, I don't see them hardly ever. Well, in fact, I haven't seen my step grandfather in many, 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 many years. So it was almost easier to like have a conversation with him in my head and kind of put that thing to bed and to rest. Because really, honestly, I feel like I've reached a level of forgiveness with him. But now I'm realizing after this conversation, like, oh my goodness, the people I have not forgiven are the ones who are closest to me, who I somehow want to cast blame, or whether they knew or did not know, I'll truly never know. But that belief that I think they did, like, I'm realizing there's a lot of harbored resentment there. So yeah,
yeah.
there's some stuff I'll have to work through, which is good. This has been, you know, it's been a good hour and 2.5, 3 minutes, because I'm figuring stuff out as we're talking about it. But I will air this because I think it's good for people to hear that. Yeah, I don't know. It can't hurt. I honestly wish that a lot of some of the best conversations I've ever had have been in counseling or therapy, and some of them I wish were recorded that I could share with people. Maybe I'll start doing that. Do a podcast. Here's my therapy session.
With your counselor.
Yeah, that bitch people would listen to that one, and I probably wouldn't have many friends afterwards. But
Oh, you know what? It just that takes like a tremendous amount of courage to share your journey. And like I feel I'm Lucas's mom. Like, we don't we don't know each other all that well, but I just feel honored that you shared your story with me, and felt comfortable enough to talk through some things.
yeah, can I ask you one more question?
Of course.
What is something difficult that you're going through right now that most people don't often see, especially as a leader? Because sometimes it can be lonely at the top.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe there's a few.
Something difficult that I am going through. The realization, like I knew coming into this work, how hard it was, how difficult trafficking can be. I think one of the things that I struggle with the most is like there's so much co-occurrence, like of different things going on. It is not just the trafficking that our folks are struggling with, right? It's the homelessness, it's the drug addiction, the dependency, the loss of family, the kids that have been taken into CPS custody. There's so much happening to our folks that I don't putting all those pieces together, and I'm a very solution focused and thinking about strategies and ways that we can really impact change, and then realizing like this isn't one issue, this is many, many, many issues, right? And so who are the partners and the relationships, and how do we solve for this? Like how do we create a world where this isn't the norm, where this isn't happening to people when it's so big and it's so complicated, right? And it's hard to tackle just one issue, but when it's layered the way that this is, people who experience homelessness are at higher risk of trafficking because they don't have a place and someone promises them a warm bed tonight. And then the next thing you know, right, that it just like that, somebody who got kicked out of their house takes a job from someone who, promises them they're going to be a model, they're going to do this, right? And boom, right, trafficking. It just is so complex. And I just feel like I don't have enough money and time and energy and not, like I can't wrap my head around all the things that need to happen for us to really impact change, right? And I know it's not just me. I know that I'm surrounded by organizations who are passionate about this work and who are fighting every day to make a difference in the lives of survivors. And I feel grateful to be a part of a community like in Houston. Texas is huge on supporting our cause. Our governor's office is invested in helping younger people survive this and thrive. And so I feel fortunate in that way. But that's, I laugh, but I really, coming into this work, I don't sleep anymore. Like I am just every night, you worry about things. The people who don't have a place to sleep, the people I know I'm going to drive up tomorrow morning and they're going to be on the sidewalk, and then I'll see them in a few hours and, just getting some rest or getting something to eat. And I so want to be a bigger part of the solution. And I don't completely know what that looks like yet. And so, I'm almost 5 months into this position and still figuring it out. We're a small team, but talented team. And I think we do really good work. And I think the more people that know about what the landing does, I haven't talked to one person yet who I share our story with, who doesn't want to support us in some way, who doesn't want to give, or who doesn't want to come and serve and just be a part of the work that we're doing. I believe like God's in right the details of what's happening every day at our center. And I see people just in small ways. Like I try to spend a part of my day every day that I'm in the office with the clients that come in. And I am intentional about that because I want to know the struggles, and I want us to be intentional about how we help. And when the greatest ask of the day is for a tent because the cold weather's coming, or for coats because, we don't know if we're going to have right warmth tomorrow night. Yeah. And it just changes your perspective, right, on so many things. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I just have to affirm and want to affirm like your ability to listen and empathize and to be very articulate with very delicate matters. I think that's really important, and I appreciate that, especially with the advice and kind of direction that you've even given me in this call. So thank you so much, or for this podcast. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
But, you're explaining to me, like you're not sleeping. You have a very heavy heart for a lot of these different people and initiatives. And, when you're talking about the multi-layered system, being the CEO of something so, what's the word I'm looking for? Like monumental potential and need and that it's needed. You're constantly like pouring yourself out in all these areas. And we've talked about faith. We talked a little bit about family, like going home and having those things. Do you feel like you have enough to fill your cup for the amount that you are pouring out to make this sustainable?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's seasonal, like right now, because it's new and there's so much right to learn in this. People talk about yeah, exactly. I know that it will get better in that way. I will have more space and more time, and I will be able to disconnect more and those things that are needed and necessary. I have a great support system. I have an incredible board, a good team, and great family. And so I feel like I have the structure around me to support me through this. And I do believe it will get easier, right? Yeah. As the more that I learn, it'll get easier.
Yeah.
This is just the season. I've got to, I feel like I just have to. Yeah.
Well, I would love to have you on again in the future, next year at some point, when maybe you're another 5 months in or close to a year, and just hear about what's been going on. Because I think it's super amazing. I want people to be able to support you guys in any way that they can. But if there's anybody out there who does want to, where would they like look to support you guys and what you're doing?
Yeah, that's good. Thelanding.org. Visit our website. If you're in our area, we'd love for you to come take a tour, serve, give. Online is the best way to reach us. Tomorrow is actually Giving Tuesday. So if you felt moved by this opportunity to hear what we do and want to support survivors of trafficking, please look us up.
Will do. Awesome. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time and let me ask questions and kind of bounce around a little bit, share some of my own story and go back and forth. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Seth. Enjoyed meeting you.
Thank you so much to Lisa for coming on the pod. I really appreciated the opportunity getting to speak with her. And it was a great conversation. Like I said at the beginning, my brain was just like a little fuzzy today. I think I've got a little extra dose of stress going on with some of the end of the year stuff. And I don't know if I need to say these kind of things on camera or not, but I'm saying them because it's kind of what I'm thinking. But I feel like I didn't do a super good job of asking questions, but Lisa did an amazing job of being very articulate in the way that we talked. So really appreciate her taking the time. Appreciate you guys being here. And thank you for listening. Again, check out thelanding.org if you want to help support that organization, and the show notes as well if you ever want to figure out how you might be able to support the podcast. All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.